How to track your calories with your AI should be pretty quick, 10 to 15 minutes per day. I use ChatGPT for this, probably very similar instructions for others, but everything I'm saying is technically specific to ChatGPT, but any good AI should work. So you can use a web browser, but I think for the purposes of this, it's much easier to get it on your phone, where you're able to just take a picture and submit it, or just talk directly into the AI and get a response that way. When you're using your AI, you don't need to be you don't need to speak in a strange way. It's not a Google search engine. You can be very conversational with it and say, "Hey, I'm at a restaurant. This is what's on my plate. It's got this kind of sauce. It looks about to be this big." And you can be very conversational with it, and that's kind of how it's designed, and it should sort through that pretty well. So don't overthink it. Talk to it like it's a person, and you should be able to get pretty good responses out of it. Now, how accurate is AI calorie tracking? There's different estimates. There are certain apps designed for AI calorie counting. Many of them have pretty bad reputations. Some of them have great reputations. I like ChatGPT because it's been working for me. It's an AI that I already had, and I've set it up in such a way that it's very convenient and makes sense to me. But what's most important is that consistent calorie tracking is more important than accurate calorie tracking. So let's say ChatGPT is way off and say it's like 20% off. If it's always about 20% off, then on the average, you'll still have the information you need. You may think, oh, I need to lower my calories a little bit because I haven't been losing weight in 2 weeks. And you lower your calories and you start losing weight. Now, whether those numbers were spot on or not, it doesn't matter, because as long as they are consistent, you're still able to make adjustments and track calories accordingly. So in my experience, ChatGPT is pretty close. Every now and then I catch it making a little error, but the more information you give it, the more accurate its responses will be. And again, as long as it's consistent over time, that's going to serve you much better than worrying too much about perfect accuracy. So the way you'd set up your AI is to make sure you actually have an account with the AI, and then be very clear with it, like I said before, very conversational about how you want it to track calories for you. So on ChatGPT, you can set up memories so that every time you speak to it, it already knows a little bit of a parameter of what it wants for you. So what I would recommend is when you set your AI up, you can have it ready. It'll have expectations, right? So you could send a picture to your AI and say, anytime I send you a picture of food, I want you to remember to tell me what you see, how many calories you think it is, and how many grams of protein. Now, I like tracking calories and protein for most people. Carbs and fat, I think, is a little bit more meticulous than necessary in most cases, but I have mine set up to tell me the calories and protein estimates. I also specifically recommend that you tell it to tell you what it sees. So, for example, we'll see later in one of our examples, I send it a picture. It's a lot of meat on the plate, and it tells me it looks like about 8 or 9 ounces. I happen to know it was more like 12 or 13 ounces. So I'm able to give it more information and clarify what it thinks it sees, and then it can make an adjustment and give me better information. So set your AI up with a memory and an expectation that whenever you send or describe food to it, it will give you an estimate of what it thinks you're talking about, how many calories it thinks there are, and how many grams of protein. And that way you don't have to preface what you need or get as many weird responses out of it. So have an account so it remembers who you are, set up a memory in there so that it can track or consistently give you the feedback that you want. So we're going to look at some examples of how I've used my AI to provide me calorie information. And when you get this information, I would not trust your AI to track it for you all day. Meaning, I would open up a note or use a very simple calorie counting app where you can put in the calories and protein. And a note on your phone would be sufficient. You just keep a tally, and at the end of the day, you total it up. I think the AIs now get a little bit unreliable as you get deeper into a conversation. So if I had given it 3 or 4 entries that day, snack, a meal, another snack, and a meal, I would start to be very skeptical of its ability to go back and total all those numbers up accurately. So I would use it every time you're having a snack or a meal to get the right number and then total that up of your own ability elsewhere in a app or note. So we're going to look at a few different examples. One of them will be whole foods, simple single ingredient things. One will be foods based on recipes or descriptions that you put into the AI. One will be non-standard items, maybe from a menu, or maybe sharing meals with someone off of a menu. And then one will be generic item combinations, meaning you may not have the specifics on what kind of noodle it is or what kind of ground beef it is, but just general ideas and how to combine those in different proportions to get a close estimate. And then meals where you kind of have no idea what's going on, may not even be on a menu, just the least, kind of the worst case scenario and how to track based on that. So we'll start with whole foods one, kind of the simplest scenario. Now this is at home with a food scale. So a food scale is close to essential. It definitely takes you up to a very reasonable amount of accuracy with your GPT or with whatever AI you're using. If you don't have a food scale, you could still use it, but you do start to kind of push into the realm of more guesswork here. So I was eating a bowl of fruit in this case, and I weighed each component as I put it into a bowl, and I just simply entered all three of those different fruits and their specific amounts into a GPT. It breaks down how many calories per ounce each of them is, does the math, gives me my total of 183 calories here. So I'm able to just jot down in my tracker 183 calories and 2.5 grams of protein. Recipes and descriptions. So my wife made a meatloaf and it came with a glaze on it. So I just took a picture of the recipe book, submitted it into the GPT, and I said, what would 3 ounces of this meatloaf be with this glaze? So it breaks down the recipe here. It makes some assumptions about the beef, which I could go back and correct if I wanted to be more specific. And it figures out the total batch. And it divides that, breaks it down at the end here. It says your portion of 3 ounces would be 310 calories. Now I picked 3 ounces very arbitrarily, but that's just so that I can decide how many ounces I really want, whether that be 6 or 7 or 8 or 9. But at this meal, my mother-in-law also brought over this dessert that I don't know anything about, but I was able to describe to the GPT. So I sent a picture of the dessert dish serving here, and I described what was in it: eggs, cottage cheese, feta, sour cream, and so on. So I said, what would this be per ounce? And it, from my description in the picture, knew what it was: a spanakopita style egg bake. And it knew more about the words that I was saying than I did. So it gives a per ounce estimate based on what I've described and what the picture showed. So it's telling me it's between 80 to 90 calories per ounce. So that helps me decide how much I wanted. Now, at this meal, I had a lot of calories left. So I said, all right, I'm going to have 9.4 ounces of that with 7.2 ounces of the meatloaf. So it goes back, grabs all the numbers, totals it up for me. For a meal is 1,550 calories with 94 grams of protein. So that was a big one, but I'd kind of been saving up for that meal throughout the day. All right, non-standard menu items and sharing food. So I enjoy a good chicken tender sub from Publix. I have a friend that works there, so when he makes those subs, he's able to kind of beef them up a little bit. So usually an extra chicken tender or two. I don't remember all the toppings on it, but I know the big calorie ones are going to be cheese and mayonnaise, so I mentioned that in here. But I take the whole sub when I get it home, and I throw it on my food scale. So I know it's 39.55 ounces. And then I share it with my wife, and I always take the bigger half because we both prefer that. So I am going to have a 20.6 ounce serving of it. So the AI here grabs the basic information from Publix itself and puts on a little bit more protein based on the extra tenders, based on the extra weight over the standard sub size, figures it out, cuts down to my portion, tells me my part of this sub was probably 1,420 calories with 64 grams of protein. And of course, I could get the other half for her as well. All right, generic item combinations. So this meal was noodles, stovetop grilled chicken, a marinara sauce, and mozzarella. And I just built my bowl, weighing each ingredient as I went. I don't exactly know what kind of noodles they were. I don't know how much oil or butter was on the chicken. In this case, I did know that the chicken was 93.7, and it looks like I had information about the mozzarella being part skim. So I just pieced that all together. Didn't really calculate ahead of time because, again, I had some calories to spare, but I just weighed my food into the bowl, took a note each time before I added the next ingredient, and it takes all those pieces, calculates them out, and gives me my meal totals here, 835 calories and 84 grams of protein. And then finally, kind of the worst case scenario, the minimal information meals. So I was at a camp, and they served baked beans, coleslaw, and pulled pork. No idea on any of the contents here. I just piled it up on my plate. I put the fork in the picture. Tried to keep part of my hand in there too, just to give the AI a sense of what was the size of the plate. And it says it looks like 8 to 9 ounces of cooked barbecue pulled pork. It gets the baked beans about right. Might have been a little bit less than 8 ounces, but that's okay. And the coleslaw gets about right as well. So it gives me a total here. But I know in this case that stack of meat is a little bit higher than it looks. So I clarify that it's more like 13 ounces, and I think it's a little sweeter than your average pulled pork. So I mentioned in there, it sounds like there's some extra barbecue sauce. So it clarifies this, updates, and pushes my plate total up to 1,340 calories with 93 grams of protein. So that's kind of the worst case scenario where you're eating something you have no idea what the contents is, how it was made, what kind of meat there was. So it's probably the least accurate number, but again, it's way more accurate than not counting and not having a clue what's going on. So that's kind of how you would approach it from the worst case scenario perspective. So again, we just have to remember that consistency beats accuracy, especially over time, and just keep making those adjustments every 10 to 14 days. Don't be super reactive, but look at the trends and change when you need to. And remember to make an account with your AI so that you can tell it what you want, and it'll be able to remember and save you time as you move through the future. But again, jot those notes down elsewhere in a tracker, in a note, something like that. Keep them totaled up for yourself, and just make a fresh one every single day.